Hello, I am Chris from Airwindows, and we're going to do a little catching up with things live stream today. I like to persist in things that are worth doing, and I see that somebody has logged on. I would like, however, to pop chat out so that I can sit it in a convenient place. Turn it to live chat because I will hear from literally anybody. And maybe this is a fine time to have a look at what I've been building today. So here we've got a little plugin called Gain. And the reason it's called Gain is because it is the template for me building things like the GUI for Console X and whatever comes after Console X. There could be other things as well. Once I have the stuff up and working, it can become a situation of like redoing compressors and things or whatever that could use some feedback, assuming I've got the feedback looking nice. And you can see I've got a slightly different arrangement for this that was the Airwindows meter. So one thing I can do here is open up a track. I'm going to be bouncing around with the tracks and the chat window and stuff, but I think we will all do the best we can today. And open up my effect stack, which reveals a copy of meter, certainly, but also this new thing. These knobs don't do anything, but this is the way that I'm going to color code them for things like having a treble EQ that's color coded in red, and then high mid can be green, low mid can be blue, and bass can be brown, which is the colors that you use for an SSL. And I'm going to see if I can't demo this fairly quickly, because seeing as yesterday I made a freezer pizza and felt rather ill, those two things are not necessarily related, but I did make a freezer pizza and not feel well and forgot that it was taco night. So tonight becomes taco night again, because I go and buy a tomato for my tacos and I use only half of it, so I need to use 2 halves of tomato per week. But I see you wondering, what's this thing? And the knobs aren't doing anything at the moment, but we've got this little band up top. And you know, it will change in size a little bit, up to and including becoming incredibly tiny. Look at how small that is. That's the tiniest little interface ever. Imagine having 36 knobs in something the size of that. It would be really difficult to work, but you could if you really wanted to. And then if you make it even smaller, it's not even there. But if you make it ginormous and huge, that band gets larger. And watch this. I'm going to put the content hide on because this is one of those streams where I don't feel like playing copyrighted music. I will get back to doing peak music through remastering it and using meter. I will do that when I am up to it. But I was at least up to doing some work. Watch this band up here. This is a tune off of a CD. You're not going to hear it all that clearly, but the point is what it is doing with this meter. It started out with a bunch of percussion, and then it switched into the guts of the song, which is doing this thing like making a cloud of blue with additional flashes, which have to do with things that the sound is doing. So one thing you might notice is, and Alex, this is the meter that will go with Console X. Console X is not going to have the chart meter. I feel this is more useful for instance, mastering. It shows you exactly what's going on and gives you a very good sense of stuff, but you couldn't really work with this in mix. You get confused about like, okay, let me rewind it, and what do I do to move these dots up or something like that, and it's not really very inspiring. This, on the other hand, that might get to be inspiring. So I have had a ASA bass track on there off of a CD, and you will notice that I could actually even close this to distract less from what's going on here. We've got the usual blue, and blue has to do with the sonority. It also lingers. It makes a little cloud. The position of these flashes of color is quiet to full crank at the edges. And as it gets louder, it will tend to migrate out towards the edges. And seeing as I can play various things, here's a deadmau5 track. This is called Sophie Needs a Ladder. It is very bright. It is very loud. But it's giving you something usable. And it's not punishing you for being overly loud. So let me stop it at an opportune moment. What's happening is the blue dots from meter cause this little cloud to happen, and then the red and green dots come in over the top of that cloud, flashing slightly faster. They don't sustain quite as much. I'm going to put that back. And I had to reverse what red and green meant, and I'll tell you why. You see, this modern stuff is very bright, and you see that we have all these flashy lights. There's actually a fair amount of dynamics in the middle of this track. It's mostly out at the loudest possible edges. Oh, here, I'll do something even more extreme. This is the Noisia Skrillex Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites remix. So this is a guaranteed unbearably loud track, and yet this meter will still give you something you can work with. What this is doing is it's showing where the loud sonorous peaks are by blue, and then it is showing dark peaks in red this time, bright peaks in green. But look at what happens when they contrast. See, here is a darker section. It's hanging around being blue. But these little sparks, and it ends up going to full green at the edges because it's a Skrillex track. So this is what you get when you have beyond Loud Nation. You can kind of hear it playing through there. However, if I play something totally different, let's play a really dark Led Zeppelin track. You're going to get a color, and this is going to be on every track and also on the mix bus. But my idea is this is something that is more usable in mix, as far as like working with it without it necessarily telling you too much in like fussy detail. Instead, it's a bunch of flashing lights. And here is what Led Zeppelin's Heartbreaker does. We've got our cloud, but the cloud is simply not as loud as before. Here's the track. That's how loud it is compared to full crank, so it's not a sausage, it has dynamics. And you see we got lots of blue sonority in there. But these flashes of purple, the flashes of purple mean that it's darker, it's sort of more retro sounding than the full-on thing. Yep, these are what the knobs are going to look like. They are working. These are not just pictures. These are working knobs that can resize and rescale. But you see how this is just glows of purple and stuff? That's because the red dots now mean the darker ones. And what it does is it causes the colors to do more of a darkness to brightness thing. Because what you might notice, and you'll definitely notice it when I throw on a Beatles track, is certain peaks jump out and they're this bright cyan. Bright cyan is a good way to do bright peaks that aren't just... I mean, you saw it with the Skrillex and Deadmau5. It's still giving you dynamics in the sense of if your colors go all the way out to the edge, you've got it at pretty much full crank. If you have black spaces, those are the dynamics you're not using. Here we got a guitar. This is his solo guitar, and it's what that looks like. Sits around being pretty much the blue sonority color, but it fills in a bunch of other colors as well. And there are different things you can do with the color picture that you get. You can go for just entirely blue colors. You can go for making... Here, let me see if I can find one of the examples that I saw. Was it up here? Maybe. Yeah. Okay. Here's one we totally can't play over YouTube. And by the way, I am thinking of, if I can manage it, getting back to Tuesday, Thursday live streams, perhaps not 8 hours at a stretch. That busted me up pretty bad. But I may want to join people on that, just because these days, if catching up with me a couple of times a week does you some good, then I'm all for it. And I'm less concerned about whether it's doing me any good and more about whether it's doing anybody any good, whether that is some kind of morale booster. Anyways, here we have, and see, I've stopped it. In Reaper, it will continue playing, and so the meter will go to black when nothing is happening. But it'll look more reasonable rather than taking up a bunch of space for that. Watch this. And I will maybe... Let's... So what we're seeing is a couple of loud noises from when probably Paul went, whoop. Green means those are bright sounds. Red or purple means they are darker sounds. Watch what happens to the area in the middle when the drums kick in and then when the band kicks in, because what's going to happen is you're going to see a picture of what a good sounding drum kit looks like on this little narrow band meter. And again, it can be tiny and it will still flash in colors. It's the colors adjust. And then when the band kicks in, seeing as this is Sgt. Pepper's Reprise, it's going to become a solid sea of blue, and inside it will be flashes of colors. But it'll be largely, this is one type of sound that you can get, is just lean on the sonority, have it be all blue, and what you probably want is the flashes of colors occurring in particular places. There was one I was looking at just before going live, and I don't remember what track it was, but it was something where there was a band of blue, and then there were flashes of cyan. And those are, since this version of it is using green for brightness, the cyan looks kind of like it's flashing white. And it is flashing white in a particular spot on, let me make this be larger, on the meter. And if it was flashing in here, it would be a relatively quiet peak. And if it's flashing all the way over here at the outside edge of the blue band, that is basically a bright peak hitting at exactly the volume it needs to in order to sit with this stuff. And you could also have bright peaks sitting at a quieter volume but still blending. But here, let us watch this because we don't get to actually hear it. Rinko's drums. But then as soon as the band kicks in, what's this? We have a immediate bands of perfect blueness with these occasional little sparks, but it is such an old record. It'll go all the way out to the edges, but we're not getting anything like rhythmic sparks doing something in particular. And again, purple or red means it's darker. Green means it is bright and not in a useful place. If you've got a green spot out here, that's probably a bright sound that's not, it's louder than it needs to be. Or down here, it could be quieter than it needs to be. And you're looking for this kind of behavior. This was an example of a hit record. And we can bump around. Oh, maybe it was Sophie. Let's see. This is the Deadmau5 Sophie Needs a Ladder. So the formal meter with all the big charts and stuff doesn't give you anything that useful with this. But this starts to give you something more useful in mix than the chart version. And I tell you why. You're getting these blue areas, which is sonority, and then if you have these bright cyan sparks, and they are coming in as cyan rather than as green. A fair bit of it is coming in as green, I gotta say. If it's blues in color, then it's not going to be annoyingly bright. But this is electro, so it's meant to be annoyingly bright. So if you want like modern hyper bright, you go for greens. You probably don't want only greens, but you go for greens. By the same token, we could also fire up Def Leppard, and that'll be a very different story. But oh yeah, no, that's a modern Deadmau5 record. This is exactly the sort of thing that people don't find meter to be very useful on. Well, this one it is. And this is Def Leppard. I would call this a more long-lasting hit record. And we're seeing some of the same information that meter shows you, in that we've got these huge, large areas of blue, and it's acting the same way that the Beatles record was, in that it's making this perfect balance here and filling in this whole area continually. But we've also got these bright flashes, and they tend to be flashes in cyan. And because I swapped red for green, it means that our drum beats and things that we want to poke out above everything else, those can flash on the display in the location you want them to. And it's a matter of hitting with brightness on top of everything else, but figuring out where you want to place that brightness. So if you were doing a modern mix, you see that this is kind of acting like a thundercloud. It's just flashing sort of irregularly all over the place. But if you were going to do a modern thing, you might want to have it flash right at the edge, where it is loudest, but not so much that it's poking out and being unnatural brightness. I wonder whether maybe I can... Well, let's have a look at this. Here is Beastie Boys. Sure shot off of a CD. And it's off of the SP1200, so bits of it are darker, and that's why it's showing up as purples and reds, even though it's a modern track. And what we get out of this is, again, that sea of blue, which is the sonority, the loud bits. But then typically when the Beasties sing, they are coming in as these areas of brightness. And we sort of got this flashy thing going on. So I am wondering whether... Let me see whether I can find the one I was thinking of. Oh, could it have been the Foos? Here's another hyper loud. This is the Foo Fighters. This one is also really pumped. You see, we've got some dark sounds in the quiet area, like underneath this text, which is either the track name or it'll be the plugin name if there's no track name. This ends up becoming super, super loud. Although it looks as if you still have a little bit of dynamics, but you really kind of don't. And see, now that we're getting super loud, we've got flashes of green. And the flashes of green are where the track goes brighter than it needs to. But a lot of the time, it's kind of pushing for this edge of everything has to be constantly cyan. That's another possible target to go for. If you were wanting to do something that was super loudinated, you'd want to try to do that. Have it just constantly lit up in cyan. That requires you to have some of the blue peaks, but also have the green flashes as well. And that's what this does. Getting into the chorus, it's sitting around being basically as loud as it can at all times. And you can kind of watch the color mostly be cyan, but constantly flashing into that green. And let's bounce over to something else that is not, because that's not the only thing we look at. Was it this one? I guess we'll find out. I keep looking at all the loudinated ones, but that's because one of the criticisms of meter itself is that it is not helpful for people who are working with modern stuff. Well, here's an example of a dead mouse hit, Professional Griefers. Watch what this is doing. This is making the blue background with the flashing cyan at pretty much exactly the right place to not be too annoying. And our green flashes are sitting around being slightly quieter than that. Like the background of this is always crackle rather than the background being like warmth. But the whole thing is 100% modern loudinated electro, and it is telling a story that the balance of the peaks are mostly pretty optimal. Like if you're trying for this sound, this is what you go for. You go for right out to the edge with some stuff. It has to fade down into either a red, or you could have it fade down into a darker color. These little flashes of red are the tiny bits of bass that are coming through. But you see, this is why it works. This is why the track works. Our flashes of overbright are combining with the blue to make this cyan, and we experience it as a tone from quiet to loud, and the brightness is balancing perfectly with the loud to get another version of overly intense. Here's an interesting variation. I haven't actually looked at this one. I got a little less than a half an hour to continue looking at these things and talking about them before I have to go, or before I choose to go and make my tacos that I didn't get yesterday. So back to Beatles. This is Good Morning, Good Morning off of Sgt. Pepper's. Notice we have, even though we've got the purples, which signify a darker retro sound, a warmer sound. If you want to do a warm vintage sound, you're gonna need to see these purple shades. But when they get carried away and start kicking, you are going to see those cyan flashes. See? Because it's like a little hint of the modern take on that stuff. It's just not placing the cyan flashes right at the outside edge. It's more of a cloud. And this is actually quite loud, this track. It's a bit annoying sounding. So let's have a look at something that is not annoying sounding. Oh well, I'll check this out. Here's a Pretenders track that is very high energy, but has a lot of space inside it. This is another take on how this kind of sound can work. It's middle of the road. And you see it's making the cloud, but it's also making lots of these little flashes all throughout. Some of it comes in purple, meaning that it's darker. And we've got those flashes of green or cyan. It flashes cyan when there is a green spike which is in the same vicinity as a blue sonority spike. The combination of those two things reads to the ear as very exciting sounding. And one of the things with these, classic rock tracks is that it looks like it's flashing randomly, especially since you can't hear the continuing track. If you heard the continuing track, you'd kind of start to pick out the correlation between the color flashing and the sound. Whereas if we go and, here, let's check this one out. This is The Fix, which is a brighter vinyl record. I keep switching it off because I'm snapping back to being able to see chat in case anybody has anything to say. So you see this very 80s sounding thing? It's doing a lot of the cyan and it's showing you some green. And what that means is there is excess brightness showing up constantly. And where it is, I'm going to make it happen as fast as I can. See the green that you see there? If it was up here, that would be a very loud peak. If it's down here, it is a bright but extremely quiet peak. So again, what we're seeing in this is that for the most part, it is sonorous or bright, but we do keep having flashes of those purples and pinks, and that means retro sounding. The purples and pinks mean not everything is bright all the time, which sometimes with these moderner tracks, everything is bright all the time and there's never anything dark. I wonder what else I can find. I feel like I keep on looking for... how about a Depeche Mode track that is off of a CD? And I'm going to keep... oh, no, wait, I can do better than that. Hang on a second. Oh, no, it's not going to have an Airwindows logo. It's going to have the name of your track. Like, for instance, it might say, instead of Console X channel, it would say drums, if this was your drums track. And it looks like with this one, we're sort of slowly building up. It might be a CD, but it is not a modern CD. It's actually hanging around there being quite dark. However, as soon as Dave Gahan starts singing, we have lit it right up. And rather than it sitting around being dark, it is immediately brightening itself. And that is his voice. Oh, you have no idea. I will briefly stop that. Then, I bet I can find this in here. Yep, Airwindows globals.txt. See this? It says user font, user color, user image, chroma. This just sits in your documents folder. You have to find the place for it. And once you have done that, I just reopen this. I have not even needed to start the program again. Looky there. So if you like your darker colors, up to and including black, or you can have it be tinged with the color of the track color, or just straight up take the color of the track color. But that can be very bright. The entire thing can be like this red or this green, and that could be hard on the eyes. And this is how we roll. This is what Console X will look like when it comes out. But wait, there's more. Let's be extra funky. Airwindows in the Documents folder. See these? These are random textures that I got off of the internet. Select all to include the little JPEG. Copy. User image. Now we've specified a user image. And look at that. Wood grain. Notice that the wood grain is not going to rotate with the knob. Watch this. The knob is just drawn over it. But if you like a more organic sort of look, yep, to put the content height on. And there we are. Oh, wait. Oh, and I have misspelled my chroma, so it went to the original thing. But the chroma doesn't really go with the Western Red Cedar, does it? So save, and we're calling the user font Palatino. What's this? There we are. So all the fonts, including the labels for the controls, get to be your choice of font. And when I put the content hide on and get it going, here is our Depeche Mode track that we were doing before. And it is showing the blue stuff. Oh, by the way, yes, Hit Record Meter already does this. Try it out sometime. You can have Hit Record Meter use these too. It will obey your choice of font. It will obey the textures. It will use whatever color you specify in Airwindows globals. That's already in Airwindows Meter. So if you want to start, even though you've only got Airwindows Meter and not all this other stuff, go ahead, knock yourself out. Now, let's see. If I scooch this up like here. So that's kind of long, sonorous, extended sounds. Oh, maybe this was the one I was thinking of. Remember how we were talking about Skrillex? Well, we can do Noisia remixing Skrillex. And this is Noisia remixing Skrillex's Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites. Noisia is has been a UK drum and bass act. And one of the things they did was they didn't make it as obnoxious sounding as the Skrillex one. Skrillex one is completely all covered with green. But Noisia is making a point of sometimes doing that, but sometimes they're making a blue region, and then their brightness is always on the outside edge. Well, now it's not, but on the outside edge of the blue region. They tend not to do that splash of green all the time. They tend to have the blue region and then also have the their brightness peak sits on top of the blue region most of the time. It doesn't go into clips quite as easily. So you can see that the meter is not dealt with. It's not really very good at dealing with this. But the Console X meter, which is this little bar meter, if this is what you're shooting for, it still gives you something you can work with. Oh, and let's do a darker track. So XTC, since it's working overtime, XTC tends to do really dark tracks in the albums I've got with them. So rather than being the mess that this is, stuff on the outside edge just fades away. This is XTC Census working overtime. It starts being very, 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 very quiet. It's like 18 dB down or more. And that's why it's in the center of the meter. But as soon as things start to happen, they jump out and fill more of the range. I don't have any Rusco track, but I recognize the name. That's one of the early dubstep guys, and I would enjoy checking that out. And here's our chorus, and when XTC goes into the chorus, we've got all this sparkly stuff going on, which is the cyan peeking through. They go brighter. in the chorus. However, it's sourced off of a vinyl record, so they have a tendency to have the bright sparkly stuff not sitting at the outside edge all the time. Instead, they break into the chorus, and the sparkly stuff is sort of on the inside. It is quieter. I don't think I have any trap, but I do have all of this stuff over to the side. Well, as far as things that act more like that than what this is one possible target, is have it flashing all of the possible colors. If you have it flashing every color, that's going to be an interesting sound. It'll be captivating and people will be interested in it. Some of the more constrained ones, Back in Black, anyone? AC/DC. So this is a very, very big record indeed. We're going to see some very well-behaved patterns here. Here it is in meter, but here it is in the display for the console X channel and bus. And we've got this big region of blue again. It's doing that. And we have a tendency to have some of the loud sounds flashing out at the outer edge there. Anything that is flashing over blue will be turned into either cyan or purple. If they're flashing outside of where blue is, they'll kind of stick out in a less pleasant way. Oh yeah, well, that is unsurprising. And this doesn't have a lot of low end. But I can show you something that does. Actually, there's a bunch of those things, but I can keep scooting down until we've got stuff that I know is a lot more dark. Here is my list. So a bunch of this stuff is real dark, but I'm looking for things that are full and dark. And I have to keep going, I think. There's a lot of stuff that is very sparse. A lot of bass, huh? I think I have to go all the way to the bottom for some of that. Things that are so dark that they couldn't really show up on the hit record measurement of meter very well. So I've got Talking Heads The Overload, which is very, very bassy. I've got various other things that are super bassy. Marvin Gaye is actually quite bassy as well, but it's not very full. We got some Burial. I'm looking for certain things. I probably have to keep skipping up. Don't mind me looking for particular stuff. Eagles. Oh, here we go. ZZ Top off of the Tres Hombres album, off of the record, is super dark. So watch what it does in hit record meter. Again, remember the colors are flipped. So where it'll show up all in green dots here, it'll be showing up all in red or purple here, because when it goes into green, it flashes into brighter colors, and that's more useful for indicating that it goes dark. And you do have to add brightness to a lot of these vinyl records to get them even close to modern stuff. Let's give this a shot. So here is our little picture. Notice an interesting thing. We've got some brightness in there. Little flashes of green, little flickers of white. This is something that I noticed this time around doing it this way, is that the same pattern that you get on a full track that is all very complicated and a lot of stuff going on, sometimes the same pattern reproduces itself in colors in these little quiet sections. And now here we go with the full band. And again, Lagrange. And it's all coming across in purple. Plus, there's an interesting side effect. See how the dark peaks, which are green on this and red on this, are going up to the top of the meter? What we see here is what you would also see if you were EQing and didn't EQ just right. You can have this blue cloud, but then if there's a big red spot showing up outside the outer edge, just like this right there, that's too much bass on the kick drum. If it's making red spots on the outer edge beyond where everything else is, that is low end on the kick drum that's more than you need it to be. And again, it's grooving along, trying to do its thing. And since it's so dark, it is 100% purple. It's almost like red, but it's mostly purple. And that's what tells you, especially when the hottest peaks are just red. If the hottest peaks are just red, this is going to make people who want modern brightness to throw up and freak out. It is unbearable to them. Although we can fool with this, I'm going to give you a new version of Air that is able to do all of these things that I have here. But if we just add brightness, but a whole heck of a lot of it, we can get into that zone where we're seeing cyan show up. And Lagrange is so freaking dark that you almost can't add enough brightness. Although we can pull back the subs half a hair. And so now we've got it sort of tonally reimagined, where it's closer to your Def Leppard style tonality. And again, if it starts flashing green, especially if the green is really loud, you bring in the dark F and ratio. See those little spikes there? If you take those spikes away, that will also take away green spots on the outside edge. And we can shut that back down. So let's see, what else would be good? It's almost taco time, I gotta say, but I am entertaining the idea of doing this somewhat more at length on Tuesdays and Thursdays again, and we'll see. I have to see whether I can handle it. It's just that I feel, if it's any use to people, doing more of that might be nice. If I can keep it together and do it and it doesn't burn me out. I certainly made a big pile of plugins that I'm still working my way through as far as posting is concerned. Ooh, I'd love to do this one, although it's Jim Morrison in Texas Radio and the Big Beat got kind of over colorful with his poetic license, I must say, which is all fine. That's all fine and well and good, but the neat thing about this track, even though it is Jim Morrison thinking that he can write just any old lyric and it'll be fine, is the groove of this one is extraordinary. And also when you look at how and we didn't have this last time we looked at it, you see that we have one of those fairly modern presentations. It's sitting in blue and even a little bit of cyan here and there. You sometimes get that with S's, like sibilants and stuff. Oh, I have another one that's kind of dark and definitely loud. Here's a Deadmau5 track. I remember. And then I'm probably going to log off and go make my tacos. Because Like here's my self-care stuff. I need to go and have dinner. I was reminding myself to drink water and eat food today. And then once I've done that in a reasonable time, I go upstairs and get ready for bed and lift weights. I do exercise. So here is multiple different pictures of the early Dead Mouse track I remember with Cascade. You're hearing little bursts of it, but what you're seeing is first what meter makes of it. And again, I feel like hit record meter is going to work out better for mastering purposes. The kind of information it shows you is more useful for if you're mastering. However, if you are not mastering, if you are in mix, I think this is going to be more useful. What this is saying is these are dark tones. These are loud. If it sits in the middle here, it's less loud. Sonority starts to creep in. And then if you see cyan, that means the brightness kicked in. And we're going to see that very soon. This is just a pad. The beat's going to come back. And when the beat comes back, the click of the kick is flashing literally right here. It's not all the way out to the edge. It's at a specific point. It is the exact right volume for this particular cloud of loud. And that is because he has managed to mix the brightness and the click of the kick, the things with impact that really poke out. And as you can see, this even makes one of those disruptive, like too many red spikes into the middle of the slew meter. But in this visualization, it's nowhere near as distracting. In fact, in this visualization, you can see it popping up in the meter percussively. Yep, those are the overslews, for sure. Speaking of which, here is something we can do, or maybe not do, to see what we have just done. Here's the same track, but now that we have stopped all of the overslews, we're no longer seeing a rhythmic pulse in the bass. I mean, it sounds fine, but look at what happens when I take this control away. Now we have the overslews, but now we see that spike poking up. It's maybe a little excessively loud when it's doing this. So yeah, it's an alternate way of seeing what it can mean. I'll skip ahead. Let's get back to where it's doing a beat. Here's a beat. So those little spikes are the kick attack. And if you kill all of the overslows exactly like this, no more spikes. You can't see any longer what the drums are doing. Whereas if we let it through, all the brightness, and you see the rhythmic percussion poking through. So the solution might be to use this technique of kind of scaling it back a little bit so that our spikes are more in the middle of the area, or I guess sometimes out at the outside edge. I think some of that is just sibilance going, and dialing it in that way. Versus just letting it blast like this. But notice that it is doing a picture where even though it is aggressively over loud, it's still doing a picture that translates to this is probably going to mostly sound good to people. and then you whack all of the overslews away, and then all the dynamics go away as well. So it becomes a matter of trying to kind of dial it in. So now what I'm wondering is whether there's anything that I want to do, because it is actually time for me to go and oh, look, I have literal Skrillex showing up here. Literal Skrillex Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites, not even the Noisia remix. Notice something interesting? We still have those bright spikes, but they are still sitting most of the time to about that place. But then when we go into the dubstep meltdown, it is a sea of flashing green. And the green is, does it really have to be this bright? But then you cut into the other part. Look at that, a contrast. Little bit of purple. And then this is what Skrillex usually sounds like all the time. But then you go to the little breakdown bit. That breakdown bit is more soothing to the... Oh, I lost it again. The breakdown bit is more soothing to the ear, and see how it's coming in a sort of a resonant purple sound. And yeah, thanks folks. I will go and get my tacos. But I will see, I don't know, send me an email or bug me on Patreon or something if you badly want me to resume the, because there's ways I can spend time with folks even if it's not entirely coding. Like a bunch of this was showing you this coding that I have just done in the purpose of getting Console X together. And some of this stuff, again, you already have this. Hit Record Meter already does this. This is the version of Hit Record Meter that you have. So if you want to make a in your documents folder thing that says Airwindows Global's text, it has to be in a Airwindows folder in the documents folder. But if you figure that stuff out and do this with it, I will be distributing that as well. Then also the images have to be next to the Airwindows Globals thing, also in the Airwindows folder. And these things are all things you can do with Hit Record Meter already. But it's going to be much more interesting when we actually have Console X and other stuff coming out along those lines. And it's all going to follow these rules. So, yeah, well, catching up with you guys is making my weird day a little bit better. I mean, you must know from me talking before that I, too, right along with you, are having a weird time and figuring out things to do. Like, I'm wondering whether I need to jump on... Remember how I got that it isn't arrived yet? But I ordered the sort of Seat Lombard, like they call it Scrooge, weird little drum machine that's going to replace a sequencer in my grungy dubstep modular. Well, it's a good thing that I got that because it's fairly likely that at some point the tariffs on that will become extremely high and I won't be able to afford doing things like that anymore. So it's good that I jumped on that now. And there is another one that is called Plinky that can also sit in a case, but it acts more like a weird little touch surface that you can do synth leads and a variety of weird, interesting stuff that would be another color that would work with that kind of stuff. And you can buy it as a kit. And you can buy it as a kit from Thunk. And can build it yourself, and it's cheaper when you do that, which is important to me because I have limited means, than if you buy the assembled ones. And I probably still have time to buy things from Thonk before it is not feasible to do that any longer. So, it's a thought. But yeah, for the time being, I'm going to go and have my tacos. And then I'm going to go and do the lifting weights and exercise, because that kind of self-care is also important. And I'm going to get some sleep. I was able to last night. I can get some sleep tonight. And be up tomorrow, at which point I will decide whether I want to do a bunch of streaming or whether I want to just take the day and kind of go flat, It was a weird day for me. Like, what with my amount of autism that is enough to choke a horse, I see a therapist. And the same thing happened that happened in 2016, is that sometimes when the crap hits the fan bad enough, my strength and anchoring comes into the role of being able to talk with people and not panic and have my foundation in a way that can be communicated. And that is why I think it might be handy for me to be doing more streaming than I did. And Alex AlphaSync, the mastering plugin is the thing that I'm using for some of this stuff. In particular, it's what I'm using for making stuff for the Peak Music posts. But what I mean to do with it is put out all the pieces of it as standalone things. I have a Air 4. It's here on this card. I did all the work to be ready for it. And so all the fancy pants stuff I'm doing with high frequencies and slew restrictions will be a part of Air 4, which is like the thing with Air 3, except for then you would be able to use Air 4 in conjunction with Meter to do anything I'm doing with mastering. So, taco time. I will see you folks later. Hang in there. I promise I will hang in there if you hang in there. Technically, I'll hang in there even if you don't, but seriously, hang in there. And I am of two minds as to whether it would be good to start doing, I don't know, Minecraft streams or whatever while just talking about things. Tell me what you want or need. And what I want and need right now is tacos and the rest of my evening to go. It's also been a super weird time for me because I am finally able, and it's anybody's guess as to whether this was a smart move, I am finally able to get my wildly deteriorating outside of my house painted and have that finally fixed. It's been decades. So I've been a complete disgrace to the rest of the neighborhood, but that's getting fixed. And it's obliterating my finances, but I have money saved up. And I have enough music stuff to run with for quite a while. So there are a number of things about that. One of them is that it's just nicer in general for me and everybody around me. I won't have to be as ashamed. But the other thing is, if I have to bail out of here, that means I get more money on the house. And that's kind of important, although I think I am more likely to just set down roots. Being a homeowner can have important aspects if you're in a nice little state like Vermont or whatever, and you know anybody who is some kind of refugee or something, if things really go sideways. But I'm not going to say any more about that. Instead, I'm going to say that it's taco time, and I will catch up with you folks either tomorrow, or if we fall back to just me only doing the same rate of checking in, it'll be posting something on Sunday. And than getting back to the live streaming on Wednesday. So let me figure myself out as far as whether I feel up to jumping into live streaming, because it'll be for somewhat different reasons now, and I think that changes things. It remains to be seen as to whether that's going to feel significantly different, or whether I'm just going to be like, oh, I have to get going at 8 o'clock in the morning and go straight through until 5, and that burns me out real good. Anyhow, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.